Because those that are driven to speak the truth because the knowledge that they have comes to them and they're so passionate about it, they then become frustrated with those who choose to seek the information from them and then don't accept it. Or maybe they accept it and then they do nothing. And when that happens, it becomes an unrewarding mission. And when time after time, the call to action typically falls flat as apathy wins out among those who hear it, the truth-telling people fall prey to that a bit. That's what I believe. And perhaps it's in that anger that they feel it's, the anger's then put into their message. I don't know. Perhaps if that were not the case and it was just the facts, it would be more successfully something that would wake people up. But clearly that's not the way it's been going. And the bottom line becomes that the messengers tend to attack each other. You see that everywhere you go. Let me make it clear. I appreciate everything they've done. There's so much work and time and money spent. It's time that we quit just seeking the new information, and rather, at the same time, we should explore it, discuss it, and spread the word. The already written, already confirmed, already shared word, let's spread it more. I believe that they were all right in many ways. And as far as the differences in their theories and styles, well, thank goodness that they're different. Thank goodness for the diversity in all of us. We need to learn to agree to disagree and gravitate towards what we have in common. The diversity that we have is something that President John F. Kennedy was so proud and passionate about. And I say thank goodness to the scholars and the messengers' views that enlighten us in all the different ways. Why are we all so quick to attack each other for our differences, rather than just be in awe of each other and impressed by each other and want to learn from each other? It is that diversity that I'm speaking of and that I want to share with all of you. It's the diversity that Kennedy was very well aware of, and he longed to share it with people. He spoke of it. Our diversity is beauty. It's what we need in our lives and our futures. It's how we are blessed. And sharing this is cherishing it. It's cherishing our children. It's giving to them the kind of quality in our daily lives that provides peace and safety. We cannot let this be absent from our life as we work each day to provide for our families. That's why I'm sharing with you this presentation on John F. Kennedy, because he felt the same way, and today is Labor Day, and this is my choice to celebrate Labor Day, because here in these times are so difficult, we are laboring, and there is hope. Kennedy believed it 50 years ago, and I believe it now. And it doesn't matter that we know that we're working hard, and it might not be there later because of the threat of war or economic failure. We may not have control over what our solar system brings us, like hurricanes and earthquakes or moving atmospheric events, although some people would argue with that. But we do have control for sure over just about everything else. But first, we must learn from the past. And in learning, we must all understand our present, which will then, in turn, lend itself to transforming us from where we are now to a place that Kennedy envisioned for us. Today, I honor his bravery, his ability to see into the future in a way that was positive. He saw an ideal world based on practicality. He wasn't afraid to speak about it and to try to incite people to hope for it, to motivate people to take action. And I believe he really believed it. And I believe he knew things were happening behind the veil in an invisible government. Perhaps he was just confident enough to underestimate it all. They did manage to murder him, in my opinion. And after my own research, I've concluded that he'd figured out what the elite had been doing. He'd figured out how far back it went, so much deeper than he'd ever imagined, and he'd figured out what they were capable of, and then he dared to interfere in their plans, to speak out against them and their plans. He took actions against them in the Bay of Pigs incident, and I believe at that point he became a rogue wild card in their eyes that they could no longer control. And with another patsy willingly and waiting in the wings, why not just get rid of him, right? The crimes that occurred are not different than the many of the ones that money, greed, and power on every level from local to federal and from country to country have been. We litigate them in our justice system daily across our country and in others. The difference is that these are just on a grander scale. They're committed by the elite and their followers. And the difference is that we all remain apathetic in one form or another because we allow it to continue. We go about our lives, our business, while these atrocities behind the veil continue. But they affect us. Why do we do that? Why do we just keep looking the other way, and we keep listening to their bullshit, ignoring their crimes, and we just keep raising the bullshit ceiling, keep taking more? Think about it. And when you commit a crime of this magnitude, you cannot do it alone. Therefore, you need help. You include others. You cannot control how they act, though, or who they'll tell. You can't control who'll witness it, what they'll say, and there are too many things that you cannot control in a crime. There are too many traces left behind and mistakes made. And folks, that is what I want you to take away from this presentation. Just the simple conclusion that it was planned by our government along with the elite and then covered up. I want you to conclude that it's obvious. And then to conclude that since it's obvious, we cannot assume that this is the only such event. Right? We must believe that it cannot be the only event. Why? Because there's just as much evidence in other events from as far back as you can go. Literally as far back as you can go. Start at the turn of the 19th century, for example, at the stock market crash of 1929, and then the Great Depression, to the World Wars, and all of the other incidents. In more recent times, the 9/11 attacks and the wars that followed. Today, we isolate and look at one such event from the middle of the last century, the assassination of possibly one of the best presidents we've ever been blessed with, but was literally snuffed out right before our eyes. We can see that thread of corrupt government and elite that runs through it, the power control thread. And it runs straight into it from the past, straight out of it through to forward, right through the very heart of our lives now. So let's start out with President Kennedy's commencement address speech at the American University in Washington on the 10th of June in 1963. It's known as the Peace Speech. I believe his words reflect that he was realizing how things really were behind the veil in the Middle East as well as at home and throughout Europe. He could see the gluttonous, greedy hand of the elite covertly in their secret society as well as overtly in our government, our country, our world. And I see it as an amazing cry out to us as a wake-up call to action. So without further delay, let's listen together to one of the most eloquently written and delivered speeches that I've ever heard. Imagine if we were in the audience back in the early 60s listening to our very distinguished and elegant president say this.